Hey guys, it's Matt the Bowtie Guy. Today we're going to talk about vaccines, the common myths and pitfalls that a lot of people have about them, and the COVID-19 vaccine trials currently going on. Let's talk about it. Before we get started today, make sure you click the button below to subscribe to my channel, hit the like button, share it with all your family and friends, check out my social media platforms on Facebook and Instagram, as well as my blog at bowtiehealth.org. So let's talk about vaccines. So there's two types of vaccines. First is a live attenuated, where we weaken a virus and we put it into the vaccine and then put it into our bodies, and that creates an immune response. They're super effective. That's why we've eradicated the measles, polio, we've gotten rid of smallpox, and so the reason we've eradicated these is because they're live viral vaccines, and so you have a much stronger immune response. The downside to that is because you are putting a live virus into the body, there's typically a lot more side effects with that. And then the other hard part is to weaken that virus and to make a lot of it to then distribute into vaccines in production requires a lot of time and a lot of resources. So that's a live attenuated vaccine, right? A weakened virus. Now, the other type of vaccine is a subunit or adjuvant recombinant vaccine. And what this is instead of using a live virus, we take a protein from that live virus that the body can recognize as a viral protein and say, ooh, that looks suspicious, let me fight that. And so it creates an immune response, you create antibodies, and poof, now you have an immune response and immunity to that disease. The good thing is because it's just a protein, not an entire virus, you have less side effects. Both are safe, live and recombinant, but the downside is it's less effective because it's just a protein or an antigen. And so we typically can make these a lot easier, a lot faster with less resources. A lot of your hepatitis vaccines, your pneumonia vaccines, your Haemophilus influenza vaccines, these are recombinant vaccines. So they use these subunits. Why are we still using these types of vaccines if they're less effective? Well, because they have less side effects, and we found out ways to make them more effective. We use something called adjuvants. Adjuvants are physical compounds that create a heightened immune response, especially to that antigen. So if you package them together, which we know how to do, and you put it into the body, your immune response is a lot stronger than it would be with just the protein, that antigen. And so that's what we do to create these bigger immune responses for these typically lesser effective antigen type vaccines. Now, this kind of leads into the conversation of some of the myths. Adjuvants have been around since 1926. These use breadcrumbs, agar, which is the gel type stuff used in Jello and Petri dishes, different types of oils, things like that, lecithin, and so we've known about these for a long time, and so we know they're safe and we know they work really well. One of the most common ones that's used are aluminum salts or aluminum hydroxide. This is kind of the controversial topic that a lot of people point to when they say vaccines cause autism. First of all, vaccines do not cause autism. There are hundreds of studies involving tens, if not hundreds of thousands of patients that prove vaccines do not cause autism. Aluminum works really well at creating an immune response to heighten it when the antigen is present. And so we take the aluminum salts and we couple it with the antigen, that protein, that viral protein, and then we package it in something that's either made of fats, like a lipid layer, or a virusome, which is like a little capsule that viruses use to contain their stuff, but it's not a virus, or hydrogels is a gel type substance, it's water-based, and then it slips into the cell and it heightens that immune response. Aluminum salts, when they're used in vaccines, are in lower concentrations than our air, our drinking water, and our food supply. Aluminum is a natural occurring metal. It is found everywhere. We have it in our bodies. We need it for our bodies. And so basically it's not going to cause us harm. It's in a microscopic level that does not pose us any trouble. We get more aluminum from the foods we eat, the air we breathe, and the fluids we drink. So do not worry about aluminum hydroxide. It does not cause autism, and it's in very healthy amounts. Next, there are a lot of people who say, I'm not getting a vaccine, it has formaldehyde in it. Yeah, that's true. A lot of vaccines do contain formaldehyde because it prevents infections. You don't want a jar, a little vial of a vaccine to grow bacteria in it and then have someone inject you with it. You're injecting bacteria. It'll cause an infection, right? You want to keep it sterile. You want to keep it clean, and so formaldehyde is used. Now, formaldehyde, all of us right now in our bloodstream have formaldehyde flowing through our veins. And that's true. It is a naturally occurring compound in our body. And if you measure the blood levels of a baby, they typically will have anywhere from 50 to 60 times the amount of formaldehyde in their blood than the highest recommended dose of formaldehyde in a vaccine. So that just goes to show you it's a naturally occurring compound. It's perfectly safe, and we've known about this for decades. It's been very well studied, so it's not to worry about. This is to prevent bacteria from growing in the vaccine itself so you don't get an infection from it. This is a protective measure. Yeah, formaldehyde is used in labs and science class when you're dissecting things, but that's why you would wear goggles and gloves, and you can't get in your mouth, you can't have food in the lab, things like that. Yeah, that's true. That's formaldehyde. It can be dangerous if ingested in your mucous membranes in large concentrated amounts. And the amount we give in a vaccine, it's extremely small. We have more of that in our blood than the vaccine does. So it doesn't pose any harm to us. Your body does not recognize the difference between that formaldehyde and the formaldehyde that naturally occurs. So do not worry about that. Now, mercury. This is the other big point of contention for a lot of people when it comes to vaccines. As of, I believe it's either 2001 or 2008, we really stopped using mercury or thimerosal in our vaccines. And the reason being is we have better antibacterial agents and preservatives to keep our vaccines clean from bacteria growing. We figured if we have safer, more natural things, use those, like formaldehyde, right? But it's still considered safe. And the reason being is there's something called methyl mercury and then ethyl mercury. A lot of pregnant women are told, all pregnant women should hopefully, but a lot of pregnant women are told not to eat large predatory fish. And that's because of the mercury content. When a large fish eats a smaller fish, which eats a smaller fish, which eats a smaller fish, the mercury levels build and build and build and create birth defects for the developing baby. And so that's why we recommend don't eat it. That type of mercury is methyl mercury with an M. Now, ethyl mercury with an E is different. That is a type of mercury that our bodies can easily break down and clear rapidly. The amount at which it's in is extremely small, and by the time you get the vaccine, you've cleared it out of your body very quickly. It doesn't pose any health consequence. It's been extremely well studied for many, many years, and we know this is very safe. It doesn't pose any harms. So methyl mercury is the poisonous kind, and ethyl mercury is the safe kind that we use in vaccines. So don't worry about mercury. We really don't use it in vaccines anymore anyways as a preservative to kill bacteria from growing. You don't have to worry about that at all. Now, the other controversial topic that a lot of people bring up when they are arguing against taking a vaccine is fetal tissue being used in vaccines. Babies are not being ground up and put into a vaccine. I know it's a morbid thought, but that's how a lot of these arguments tend to sound, is they're putting aborted fetal tissue into these vaccines. That is not true. Where this comes from is back in 1966 and 1967, there was one baby in 66 and one baby in 67 who were aborted electively early term, and some of the tissue from their lungs was removed. Since then, we have used those same cells. We call them a cell line. We keep them in a laboratory, we reproduce those cells, we let them divide and grow, and we use those to study viruses. Viruses can't just live forever on a surface or in a test tube. They need to be in a cell to survive. And so we use those cell lines over and over and over. We grow them and they multiply and reproduce, and we keep them alive so we can study these viruses to create vaccines to treat these diseases. And so that's where this comes from. We're not going down to the local hospital and finding these aborted babies and using them in some unethical way. This is very well established. There is no aborted fetuses in your vaccines. Sometimes bovine serum or calf bovine serum is used to keep certain cells alive for those viral cultures. So sometimes those are in vaccines, but it's not something that's actually in the vaccine itself, but it's used as a cell culture medium. And so that's where you might hear that, oh, there's cow serum inside of this. We know that other species serum can be highly immune inducing. In other words, it can cause an allergic reaction. It's the same reason why antivenom, when you're bit by a snake, has a high risk for anaphylaxis, because it's horse serum. And there's a high cause of allergic reactions to that. So those are really all the contents of vaccines. They're very safe. We've researched them for decades. There's some vaccines that we don't study in babies or pregnant women because we know physiologically that they're equivalent, or that it's unethical to study them in there, but we study them in healthy people to determine that they are safe. And using physiologic science that we know of right now, we can apply that to a baby or a pregnant woman and theoretically surmise, hey, this will be perfectly safe. So do not freak out. Vaccines are extremely well studied. We know everything that's in them. We know how safe it is. We can say that vaccines work. We've cured diseases. We've eradicated diseases that haven't existed now for decades. That's amazing. And it wouldn't have happened if it wasn't for immunizations. Now, the COVID-19 vaccine trials. Currently, there's about 5, 6, or 7 around there vaccines that are fighting to take the top spot for safe and effective as soon as possible. A few of them are using an adenovirus from chimpanzees or humans, which is basically the common cold. It's been weakened, and the SARS-CoV-2 virus, the coronavirus instructions are put in the virus, and then it's injected into the body, and then that virus goes into the cell, and it makes those viral proteins for COVID-19, so your body says, oop, there's something bad here, I need to protect you against it, and it creates an immune response, antibodies, and now you're immune. There's that type. There's a similar type of vaccine that's being produced using something called a vesicular stomatitis virus, which is usually found in livestock, so cows, pigs, horses, things like that. And the same type of principle applies. You put the genetic information in for instructions, they inject the virus into you, it goes into your cell, makes the protein, and now you have an immune response. One of the vaccines that I'm really excited about that's already in phase 3 clinical trials is made by a company called Moderna, located here in Cambridge, Massachusetts. It's a new vaccine. It's a novel treatment that's never been used before. It's actually really impressive. And what it is something called an mRNA, or messenger RNA vaccine. And how this works is a piece of mRNA, which is a type of genetic instructions to make proteins, is carried into a cell. The cell then uses those instructions to make a protein, which then triggers an immune response. Before, this was thought to be impossible to get that messenger RNA into a cell. Apparently, Moderna has cracked that code, which is very impressive. And so far, reports are saying that Moderna's studies are looking very promising, with a good immune response and very limited side effects. The protein that it makes is something that researchers have figured out that the SARS-CoV-2 or coronavirus actually has, that triggers the immune response. So they figured out which proteins triggers this, and they've isolated that, figured out which mRNA is used to create that protein, and that's what's being used to trigger this. It does seem promising, and it would make sense that there's fewer side effects because the messenger RNA is carried by a simple subunit into the cell, and then your own cells, your own body makes the protein, and then your immune response is created from that. So it's super, super exciting that this is coming out, especially having a background in molecular biology. I'm very amped up to see what comes of this. It should be interesting to find out which vaccine comes out first in terms of having safety and efficacy. So one question I keep getting from a lot of family and friends is that, if a vaccine does get emergency use authorization, will I get it? And that's a tricky question. I've gotten every vaccine I've needed to for practicing medicine and nursing, traveling all over the world, being around very different types of animals all over the world. You need certain vaccines for certain exposures and risks. So I'm not opposed to vaccines by any means. All of you should know that by now about me. However, given the politicization of this pandemic, a lot of these rushed emergency use authorizations for antibody tests and for convalescent plasma and hydroxychloroquine, it's made me a little hesitant in terms of the vaccine. Now, having said that, if something gets approved for emergency use and it comes out and the science and the data and the evidence is strong to suggest that this is very safe and it has very, very limited side effects with a great efficacy, it creates an immune response that is believed to be protective, I will absolutely take this vaccine and I will recommend it to family, friends, patients, whoever. But I need to be convinced that the science is there and that it will work and it's safe to do so. So that's kind of my opinion on that. Overall, my strongest recommendation right now is please get vaccinated. Make sure you're up to date on all your immunizations that you need based on your risk. And the best person to talk about that with you is your primary care provider. So please give them a call. They'd be more than happy to hear from you and get you up to date on your vaccinations. This is really important. Flu season's coming up. Pneumonia season is coming up. There are vaccines for a lot of you who are within certain risk categories that you should get now more than ever. This is going to be a bad flu season just based on the fact that it's going to be hard to tell the difference between the flu and COVID. Pneumonia is a secondary complication from COVID. It's a secondary complication from influenza. So it's smart if you're within those risk categories to get these vaccinations. So please talk to your primary care provider. They don't get paid by Big Pharma. They don't get paid by these companies who push vaccines. There's no, big conspiracy behind it. I don't get paid for any of this stuff. I'm doing this because I feel it's my role to educate everyone out there, yourselves included, with the best and most up-to-date information as I possibly can. So my recommendation is call your primary care office, have this discussion with them about vaccinations. If you're worried, if you're scared, if you have any uncertainty, if you don't trust vaccines in any way, talk to them. Help them allay your fears. Take the information you heard today, take some notes, write down some questions, call them, and see what they have to say about it. But I can assure you that vaccines are very safe. They've been around for decades upon decades. Millions upon millions of people have had vaccinations with no consequences other than they've protected themselves and they've protected others around them. So much so that they've actually been able to eradicate many infectious diseases like measles, smallpox, and polio. Alright guys, so as we discussed, vaccines are super safe. If you're not sure, call your primary care provider, have this discussion with them, talk to them about your questions, your fears, your distrust, and see if they can answer those questions. Use this video. See if this helps you any further. If you have friends or family who don't believe in vaccines and you're kind of concerned about their health, especially given the pandemic and other infectious diseases out there, show them this or just have a conversation with them. Try to let them know that, hey, I can understand why you're scared. There's a lot of information floating around the internet and it can be scary. But here's the science. Here's the facts. In the links below, I will make sure I have the FDA, the NIH, the CDC websites. I'll make sure there's some references there that you can use to educate yourselves and others with accurate, up-to-date information. So that's vaccines, why I think they're safe, and make sure you get up to date with all your immunizations to protect yourself and those you love around you. I'm Matt the Bowtie Guy, signing off. See you guys later.